The unexpected call. The morning sun spilled across the glass walls of Google's headquarters, casting a warm glow over the endless rows of offices. Inside, the hum of keyboards, faint laughter, and hurried footsteps filled the air. Sundar Pichai walked through the quiet corridor leading to his office holding a simple cup of tea in his hand. Even after becoming one of the most powerful CEOs in the world, Sundar had never given up his simple habits. His colleagues often wondered how a man with so much power still carried himself with such calm humility, never raising his voice, never demanding attention. To the outside world, Sundar's life seemed perfect. He was leading one of the biggest companies in history, respected by millions, and admired for his intelligence and kindness. But on that particular morning, as he closed the door to his office and looked out at the San Francisco skyline, his phone began to buzz on his desk. It wasn't just any call. The screen showed a name he hadn't seen in years. His sister. He froze. For a moment, Sundar couldn't bring himself to answer. Memories flooded back. His childhood in Madurai, long summer afternoons playing outside, with his sister, sharing secrets and their endless talks about dreams. They were once inseparable. But as the years went by, life pulled them in different directions. Sundar's career took him across the world, while his sister chose a quieter life back in India. Though they always loved each other, distance and misunderstandings had built a wall between them. With hesitation, he finally picked up the call. Anna. Her voice cracked through the speaker, weak, trembling, filled with something he couldn't immediately understand. His heart tightened. "What happened? Are you okay?" he asked, his usually steady voice suddenly laced with panic. There was silence for a few seconds, only the sound of faint breathing. Then she whispered, "I need your help. I wouldn't call you otherwise. Everything is falling apart." Sundar's grip on the phone tightened. He had faced aggressive investors, tough decisions, and global crises. But hearing the vulnerability in his sister's voice left him shaken in a way no boardroom battle ever had. "Tell me what's going on," he urged gently, walking to the corner of his office where nobody could overhear. Her words came slowly, like each sentence cost her strength. "I tried to handle it on my own. I didn't want to disturb your life. You are so far away, so important now. But, Anna, I am drowning." The last word echoed in his ears. Drowning. Sundar pressed his palm against the window glass, his reflection staring back at him. He had always promised himself that no matter how big his life became, he would never forget his family. Yet now, hearing her breakdown, he realized he had failed to notice her struggles. "Where are you right now?" he asked. "Chennai?" She replied softly. "But Anna, it's not just about me, it's about the children. If something doesn't change soon, they will lose everything. We will lose everything." Sundar's heart pounded. Children? Losing everything? Dozens of questions swirled in his mind, but he kept his voice calm. "Listen, don't worry about disturbing me. You are my sister. Nothing is more important than this. I will fly to you. Just hold on until I get there." There was silence again. Then he heard her faint sobs, followed by a shaky, "Thank you, Anna." After the call ended, Sundar sank into his chair. His mind was racing. He had been scheduled for high-profile meetings that week, including one that could change the future of Google's AI projects. But at that moment, none of it seemed to matter. He could feel the weight of his sister's words pressing down on him. For the rest of the day, Sundar tried to focus, but he kept replaying the call. He imagined his sister's face, her tired eyes, the fear in her tone. He thought of their childhood again. The times she stood up for him when he was bullied in school. The times she gave up her own share of food so he could have more. She had always protected him when they were young, even though he was the elder, and now she was the one in need. That evening, Sundar sat at the dining table in his home. His wife noticed his distracted expression. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" she asked gently. He nodded. "My sister called. She needs me." Her eyes widened. "After all these years?" "Yes," Sundar replied softly. "She said everything is falling apart. She mentioned the children. I don't know the details yet, but she sounded desperate. His wife reached across the table, holding his hand. Then you must go. Family always comes first. Sundar felt a wave of gratitude. In moments like this, he realized how blessed he was to have someone who understood his heart. He immediately began making arrangements to leave for India the next day. The following morning, as the private jet soared above the clouds, Sundar stared out the window, lost in thought. He couldn't help but wonder why his sister had waited so long to reach out. What could have gone so wrong that she would break years of silence to call him now? When he landed in Chennai, the heat of the city wrapped around him like an old memory. The familiar scent of jasmine and dust filled the air, and the chaos of traffic reminded him of his childhood days. But beneath the nostalgia, there was a heavy sense of urgency. He was no longer here as a visitor. He was here because something was broken, and he had to fix it. As he arrived at his sister's modest apartment, Sundar hesitated before knocking. The door creaked open, and there she stood. Her face looked thinner than he remembered, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. Yet when she saw him, a flicker of relief lit her expression. "Anna," she whispered again, tears streaming down her cheeks. He stepped forward, pulling her into an embrace. For a moment, the years of distance melted away. They were just siblings again. One lost, the other returned. But as she pulled back, Sundar noticed the tiny hands clutching at her sari. 2 children stood behind her, a boy and a girl, both with wide, frightened eyes. They looked no older than 10. "These are my children," she said softly, her voice trembling. "They are the reason I called you." Sundar knelt down to meet their eyes. "Hello," he said gently, forcing a smile. But inside, his chest tightened. What had happened that left his sister and her children in this state? Before he could ask, his sister took his hand and led him inside. The apartment was dimly lit, the furniture worn and the air heavy with silence. He noticed a pile of unopened letters on the table, stamped with official seals. He also noticed the children's school books lying scattered, their pages half torn. Finally, his sister sat down and buried her face in her hands. "Anna, I am sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I thought I could handle it. Now it's too late." Sundar placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's never too late. Tell me everything." Her voice broke as she spoke. "My husband left us 2 years ago. He promised he would send money, but he disappeared. I tried to work, but the debts grew. The landlord is threatening to throw us out. The school is asking for fees we cannot pay. Every day I am drowning in shame because I cannot give my children the life they deserve. Yesterday, I almost lost hope. That's why I called you." Sundar's chest ached as he listened. The image of his strong, independent sister reduced to tears was almost unbearable. He wanted to say something reassuring, but before he could speak, the little boy tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle," the child whispered, "are we going to lose our home?" Sundar looked into his nephew's eyes filled with fear no child should carry. His throat tightened. "No," he said firmly, though inside he wasn't sure how deep the problem ran. "You will not lose your home." But as he turned back to his sister, she whispered something that chilled him to the core. "Anna, it's worse than losing our home. Tomorrow, they are coming to take everything away." Her words hung heavy in the silence, filling Sundar with dread. And in that moment, Sundar realized he had stepped into something much darker than he had imagined. The storm at the door. The night passed slowly in his sister's apartment, every tick of the clock echoing like a drumbeat in Sundar's ears. He sat in the dimly lit living room while the children slept in the next room, their small breaths a fragile reminder of innocence caught in the middle of a storm. His sister had fallen asleep in exhaustion on the couch, but Sundar couldn't close his eyes. His mind kept returning to her final words. "Tomorrow they are coming to take everything away." He tried to reason with himself. He had faced countless challenges in the corporate world, from handling billion-dollar negotiations to steering Google through crises that could have sunk the company. But nothing in his professional life had prepared him for the sight of his sister's fear. or the weight of his nephew's question about losing their home. As the first light of dawn slipped through the thin curtains, Sundar stood and walked quietly to the small balcony. The streets below were already alive with honking rickshaws, vendors calling out their prices, and the scent of hot tea drifting in the air. Yet for all the noise of the city, he felt a strange silence within himself. He knew today would bring answers that could change everything. His sister woke with swollen eyes and sat beside him, her hands clutching a faded shawl. "Anna, I don't know what will happen today. They said if I don't pay by morning, they will seize everything, the furniture, the books, even the children's clothes. I begged for more time, but they refused." Sundar looked at her, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are they?" She swallowed hard. "Moneylenders. I borrowed when I had no choice. It started small, just to cover school fees and food, but the interest grew like fire. I was trapped before I even realized it." A chill ran down his spine. He knew of such men, the kind who preyed on desperation, who made a business out of pain. "How much do you owe?" he asked softly. Her lips trembled as she spoke. 6 lakh rupees, maybe more with interest. Sundar did the quick math in his head. For him as a CIO, that amount was not impossible. But it wasn't about the money, it was about the method. If his sister had fallen into the grip of ruthless lenders, simply paying them off might not be enough. Men like that rarely let go, once they had their claws in. Before he could ask further, a sharp knock rattled the door. His sister flinched, her face draining of color. "They are here," she whispered. The knock turned into pounding, shaking the wooden frame. A harsh voice called out, "Open the door. Today is the last day. Don't make us come inside." The children woke with frightened cries, rushing to their mother. Sundar stood, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside him. He walked to the door and opened it. 3 men stood outside. Their clothes were simple, but their expressions carried the weight of intimidation. The tallest of them, with a thick mustache and dark eyes, stepped forward. "So, you thought you could hide?" he sneered, pushing his way inside without permission. His sister immediately stepped between them and the children. "Please give me more time. I promise I will find the money." The man laughed coldly. "Time is finished. We gave you months. Now we take what belongs to us." He gestured to the other 2 men who began walking around the small apartment, picking up items and making notes. One of them even bent to check the children's shoes. Sundar's jaw tightened. "Stop," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The men froze, surprised by the authority in his tone. The leader turned to him, squinting. "And who are you?" Sundar stepped forward, his eyes steady. "Her brother." The man smirked. "Brother or not, the debt is real. If she cannot pay, we take everything." Sundar's sister tugged at his arm, whispering urgently, "Anna, don't. They are dangerous." But Sundar didn't back down. "How much?" he asked plainly. The man's eyes flickered with greed. 6 lakh, plus interest. 10 lakh total. 10 lakh? Sundar repeated. His sister gasped. She had not realized how much the figure had grown. The men had twisted the debt far beyond its original size. The leader grinned. "Pay now and we walk away. Otherwise we strip this place bare." Sundar's heart ached as he glanced at his sister's trembling form and the terrified children clinging to her sari. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and calmly said, "Give me your account details. I'll transfer it." The men looked at one another, taken aback. One of them muttered, "This guy is serious." But the leader narrowed his eyes. "Who are you to throw money around so easily?" Sundar didn't answer. He simply waited, his silence more powerful than words. Finally, the man scribbled an account number on a scrap of paper and handed it over. Sundar forwarded it to his assistant overseas, instructing the transfer immediately. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with confirmation. "Check your account," he said quietly. The man pulled out his phone, his face lighting up as he saw the deposit. "It's there," he whispered to his partners. For a moment it seemed like the storm had passed. But then the leader's smile turned sly. He pocketed the phone and leaned closer to Sundar. You think this is over? Debts are not just numbers, my friend. When someone borrows from us, they belong to us. We will be back. Sundar's eyes hardened. No. You will not come back here. Not ever. The man's smirk faltered under Sundar's unflinching stare. There was something about this quiet stranger that unsettled him, though he didn't understand why. With a sharp gesture, he signaled his men to leave. As the door closed behind them, his sister collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Anna, what have you done? You don't understand. These people, they don't stop. You may have paid them today, but they will come again. They will find another reason. Sundar placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Then we will face them, together. But first we need to understand everything. No more secrets between us. For the rest of the morning she told him everything. How she had hidden her struggles out of pride, how she had been too ashamed to ask for help sooner, and how the debts had spiraled out of control. Sundar listened patiently, never judging, never raising his voice. His heart broke with every word, but he also felt a fire burning within him. This was not just about saving his sister from moneylenders. It was about restoring her dignity, her strength, and her children's future. Yet, even as he resolved to fight for her, Sundar couldn't shake the words of the lender. We will be back. That night, as he tucked his nephew and niece into bed, the boy whispered, Uncle, will they really leave us alone now? Sundar forced a smile. Yes, he said softly, brushing the boy's hair. But deep inside, he wasn't sure. He returned to the balcony, where his sister stood staring at the night sky. Anna, she said quietly, you saved us today. But I fear this is only the beginning. Sundar turned to her, his expression firm. Then let it begin, because I will not let anyone break this family again. Just as he spoke, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, You made a mistake interfering. We are watching you. Sundar's blood ran cold. He turned the screen toward his sister, and her face went pale. The storm was far from over. It had only just begun. Shadows in the city. The night after receiving the threatening message stretched endlessly for Sundar. He barely slept, his mind haunted by the words on the screen. You made a mistake interfering. We are watching you. It wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. He knew enough about people who thrived on intimidation to understand that such messages were never empty. They had marked him, and by extension his sister and her children. At dawn, Sundar sat at the small wooden table in the kitchen. His sister was already awake, her eyes red and weary from crying. She held a cup of weak tea, her hands trembling as she lifted it. Anna, she whispered, you should leave before this gets worse. They are dangerous men. You don't know how far they can go. Sundar shook his head. I am not leaving. If they are dangerous, then it is more reason for me to stay. I cannot walk away now, not when you and the children are at risk. Tears welled in her eyes again. But you are not the same boy who grew up here anymore. You are the CEO of Google. Your life is different. What if something happens to you? Because of us? He leaned forward, his voice calm but resolute. Being a CEO does not make me less of a brother. It makes me more responsible. What is the point of leading millions if I cannot protect my own family? Those words silenced her. Deep down she knew he was right, but her heart trembled at the thought of what could come next. Later that day, Sundar decided to step outside, determined to get answers. He wanted to know who exactly these men were and why they were so confident in their threats. The streets of Chennai bustled with life as he walked, vendors shouting, children running barefoot, the smell of spices and petrol filling the air. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm of the city, he felt eyes following him. At a corner tea stall, Sundar struck up a quiet conversation with the shopkeeper, an elderly man with kind eyes who seemed to know everything happening in the neighborhood. Those men, Sundar said carefully, the ones who come to this building often, Who are they? The shopkeeper hesitated, glancing around nervously before lowering his voice. They are not simple moneylenders. They belong to a network. People call them the Red Circle. They control half the city's underground economy, loans, land, even politics. Once someone falls into their trap, it is almost impossible to escape. Sundar felt a chill. The Red Circle. It sounded less like a group and more like an empire of fear. And their leader? He asked. The shopkeeper's hands trembled as he poured tea. A man named Karthik. Nobody dares say his name aloud. He has connections everywhere. Police, lawyers, even businessmen. Some say he can ruin anyone with just one phone call. Sundar listened carefully, his mind racing. This was no small problem. This was a deeply rooted system that preyed on families, like his sister's. As he walked back toward the apartment, his phone buzzed again. Another message. Leave Chennai before sunset, or you will regret it. Instead of fear, Sundar felt a spark of defiance. All his life, he had believed in solving problems with patience and humility. But now he realized that humility alone would not protect his family. He needed strategy. He needed to understand the enemy before they struck again. That evening, as the children played quietly in the corner, Sundar gathered his sister at the table. Tell me, he said gently, was this only about money, or is there something more? She looked down at her hands, silent for a long time. Then she whispered, I didn't want to tell you, but yes, there is more. Sundar leaned in. What do you mean? After my husband left, I took a job at a small factory. It was owned by people connected to these men. I worked long hours, but they underpaid us. When I protested, they warned me. Then they cut my salary and forced me to take loans from them, just to survive. Anna, they trap workers this way. Hundreds of families are suffering. I wasn't just a victim, I was a witness. And now they want to silence me too. Her confession hit Sundar like a blow. It wasn't just about a personal debt. It was about a system built on exploitation. Before he could respond, there was another knock at the door. Softer this time, but urgent. Sundar opened it cautiously, to find a young boy from the building panting. Sir, the boy said breathlessly, a group of men are waiting downstairs. They are asking about you. Sundar's sister gasped. Anna, they are here again. Sundar thought quickly. Stay inside with the children, lock the door after me. No, she cried, grabbing his arm. You can't face them alone. He placed his hand gently over hers. I am not alone. I carry the truth, and that is more powerful than fear. Reluctantly, she let him go. As Sundar stepped out into the humid evening air, he saw them. 4 men standing by a black jeep, their eyes fixed on him. The leader of yesterday's visit wasn't among them, but the men carried the same aura of menace. One of them stepped forward. Mr. Pichai, he said mockingly, stressing the surname as though he had discovered a secret. You think your money can protect you here? This is not America. This is our ground. Sundar didn't flinch. And on your ground, you still prey on women and children? Does that make you powerful or weak? The men bristled at his words, their eyes narrowing. One of them raised his hand threateningly, but the leader stopped him. Karthik wants to meet you, he said coldly. Tonight, if you refuse, your sister will pay the price. Sundar's heart pounded, but he forced his face to remain calm. Where? You will be told when the time comes. For now, wait for our call. Don't try anything foolish. With that, they climbed into the jeep and drove away, leaving behind the stench of exhaust and dread. Sundar stood there, his fists clenched. Meeting Karthik meant stepping directly into the lion's den, but avoiding it could mean putting his sister in greater danger. Back upstairs, his sister's face turned pale when he told her, Anna, don't go. He is ruthless. People who go to meet him, they don't always return. Sundar placed a hand on her shoulder. If I don't go, they will never stop. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every family suffering under them. I need to see the man who thinks he owns this city. His sister shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, promise me you'll come back. He didn't promise. He couldn't. Instead, he embraced her, silently vowing that, whatever happened, he would not let her or her children be destroyed by these men. Late that night, as the city's lights flickered in the distance, Sundar's phone buzzed again. A single message appeared. Come alone. Rooftop of Hotel Crystal, midnight. He stared at the words, his heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. And as the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sundar knew there was no turning back. The rooftop meeting. The night air of Chennai was thick with humidity as Sundar walked through the nearly deserted streets. Every step he took felt heavier, as though the weight of his family's survival pressed on his shoulders. The city, usually alive with chaotic energy, seemed unnervingly still. Rickshaw drivers leaned sleepily against their vehicles. Stray dogs wandered the sidewalks, and the glow of neon signs flickered in the distance. He kept checking his phone, staring again and again at the message. Come alone. Rooftop of Hotel Crystal, midnight. His watch ticked closer to 12. He reached the hotel, a tall concrete structure whose faded paint hinted at better days long past. The lobby was empty except for a dozing receptionist who didn't even bother to look up. Sundar's footsteps echoed against the tiled floor as he moved toward the elevator. Inside the elevator, his reflection stared back at him from the mirrored walls. The quiet, humble CEO the world knew looked different tonight. There was no polished stage, no spotlight, no applause. Just a brother walking into danger for the sake of family. He clenched his fists briefly, then let them go. Strength, he reminded himself, was not always about force. It was about resolve. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal the rooftop entrance. A gust of warm air swept in, carrying with it the faint sound of the city below. Sundar stepped onto the roof. Under the dim light of a few scattered bulbs, he saw them. 5 men in dark clothes. At their center stood Karthik. He was not what Sundar expected. Karthik was not tall or muscular, but he carried himself with the calm menace of someone who knew power did not depend on appearance. His sharp eyes studied Sundar the way a predator studies its prey. His lips curled into a faint smile. So this is the famous brother, Karthik said, his voice smooth but laced with arrogance. The CEO who thinks his American money can solve Indian problems. Sundar didn't flinch. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to end this, leave my sister and her children alone. The men around Karthik chuckled, but Karthik simply tilted his head. Do you know how many people have begged me for mercy in this very spot? And do you know where they are now? He snapped his fingers, and one of his men stepped closer, cracking his knuckles. Sundar met Karthik's gaze steadily. I am not here to beg. I am here to stand. The rooftop grew silent, the only sound the hum of the city far below. Karthik studied him for a moment longer, then burst into laughter. You have courage, I will give you that. But courage is a poor weapon against the red circle. Your sister signed papers. Debts don't vanish because a brother shows up with money. The debt was already paid, Sundar replied firmly. I transferred the amount you demanded. I have proof. Karthik waved a dismissive hand. Proof means nothing here. Contracts mean nothing here. What matters is control. When your sister borrowed, she became ours. When you paid, you became ours too. Do you understand? Anger stirred in Sundar's chest, but he kept his voice level. Control only works if people believe in it. The moment they stop fearing you, your empire falls. Karthik's smile faded. For the first time, his eyes narrowed with irritation. You speak like a man who thinks he knows this city. But you don't. You left long ago, didn't you? You built your empire somewhere else, far away. Here you are nothing but another outsider. Sundar stepped closer, lowering his voice. I may have left, but I never forgot. This is still my home, and unlike you, I don't need fear to command respect. The words cut deeper than Sundar realized. Karthik's face darkened, and he snapped his fingers. Suddenly, 2 of his men grabbed Sundar by the arms. Listen carefully, Karthik said coldly, leaning close enough for Sundar to smell the faint trace of tobacco on his breath. I will allow you to walk away tonight, but if you interfere again, if you even think of protecting your sister. The next time you will not walk away at all, and your sister will suffer first. Sundar felt the men's grip tighten, but he didn't struggle. Instead, he looked Karthik in the eyes and said quietly, "If you touch her, or her children, you will regret it. I promise you that." Something about the certainty in his voice unsettled Karthik. For a brief second, his composure cracked, but he quickly covered it with a smirk. "Throw him out," he ordered. The men shoved Sundar hard toward the exit, nearly sending him to the ground. He caught himself, straightened, and without looking back, walked away. When he returned to the apartment, his sister rushed to him, her face pale. "Anna, what happened? Did he hurt you?" Sundar shook his head, though his mind replayed every word of the encounter. "No, but he made his position clear. He thinks he owns you. He thinks he owns everyone trapped in his web." She sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. "Then it's hopeless. Nobody stands against him. Those who try disappear." Sundar sat beside her, his voice steady. "Hopeless only if we accept defeat. I saw something tonight, something Karthik doesn't realize. His power depends on silence. If people speak, if truth comes out, his control breaks." She looked at him with weary eyes. "And who will speak?" "Everyone is afraid." He took her hand gently. "Then I will. And maybe when others see it, they will find their courage too." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The next day, Sundar began discreetly talking to neighbors, shopkeepers, and workers at the factory where his sister had been employed. At first, most avoided him, shaking their heads and muttering that nothing could be done. But gradually, as he listened without judgment and showed genuine concern, they began to open up. Stories spilled out. Families trapped in impossible loans, workers underpaid and beaten when they protested, mothers threatened for speaking up. It was worse than Sundar had imagined, but one story stood out. A man in his 40s leaned close and whispered, "Karthik has a book, a ledger. He keeps it hidden. It has names, amounts, everything. If you find it, you will have proof, not just for your sister, but for hundreds of others." The mention of the ledger struck Sundar like lightning. If such proof existed, it could expose Karthik's entire operation. That evening, as Sundar sat with his sister, he shared what he had learned. "There's a ledger," he said softly. "If we can get it, everything changes." Her eyes widened with fear. "Anna, that book is guarded. People whisper about it, but nobody dares to touch it. If you go after it, they will kill you." Sundar leaned back, the flickering light of the bulb casting shadows across his face. "Sometimes to break chains, someone has to take the risk." She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "Then promise me you won't do it alone." Before he could answer, there was a sudden crash outside, a stone thrown through the apartment window, shattering glass across the floor. Attached to it was a piece of paper. Sundar picked it up. The words were scrawled in red ink. "Last warning. Leave now, or the children will pay." His sister clutched her children to her chest, trembling in terror. Sundar's eyes hardened as he looked at the note. They had crossed a line. And he knew at that moment there was no turning back. The fight was no longer about debt. It was about justice, dignity, and survival. The search for the ledger, the shattered glass, still lay scattered across the living room floor. Next morning, sun rays streamed through the broken window, highlighting the sharp edges like tiny shards of warning. Sundar swept them into a pile carefully, his movements steady, though his mind was a storm. The note they had sent, threatening the children, was folded in his pocket. Every time he touched it, his resolve hardened. They had crossed the final line. His sister sat silently at the table, staring at her children as they ate a meager breakfast. Her face carried exhaustion, fear, and guilt, all at once. Sundar could sense her inner conflict. Half of her wanted him to fight back, half of her wanted him to take the children and run far away. "Anna," she finally whispered, "I can't live like this anymore. Every sound outside the door makes me jump. Every shadow feels like them. Maybe it's better if we just leave Chennai, start somewhere new, far from their reach." Sundar placed his cup down, looking directly at her. Running doesn't erase chains, it only makes them heavier. Even if you leave, they will find you. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but one day they will. The only way forward is to cut the chains completely. But how? Her voice cracked, tears spilling from her eyes. They are too strong. Who? Sundar reached into his pocket and unfolded the note, placing it on the table. They believe fear is stronger than truth, but I know something they fear more. Proof. The ledger is real. If we can get it, their empire collapses. They won't just be criminals in whispers anymore. They will be exposed in daylight. She shook her head violently. People who try to find that ledger disappear. I heard about one man. He worked in their office, tried to steal it. They found him days later, broken, unrecognizable. Sundar leaned closer, his voice calm but firm. Then we must be smarter than him. We cannot do this recklessly. We need to plan, to observe, to move quietly. Her eyes filled with both fear and reluctant hope. And if they discover you? Sundar's lips tightened. Then I will not be the only one they will have to face. That afternoon, Sundar disguised himself in simple clothes, blending in with the ordinary workers of the city. He returned to the factory where his sister had once worked, walking through the crowded alley that led to its entrance. The building loomed large, its rusting gates guarded by two men who eyed every passerby with suspicion. Inside, the noise of machines filled the air, and the smell of sweat and oil clung to every wall. Sundar pretended to be just another curious man looking for work, asking small questions, listening more than he spoke. Slowly, he pieced together fragments of information. One worker, when offered tea outside during his break, whispered cautiously, "They keep important things upstairs, in the office room above the factory floor. But nobody goes in except Karthik and his closest men. There are cameras, locks, and guards who don't ask questions," another worker added. "Sometimes at night a man carries a black leather bag out of that office. They say it holds the ledger. But where he takes it, nobody knows." The image of that bag burned into Sundar's mind. If he could track it, he could find the ledger. Over the next 2 nights, Sundar returned to the area, keeping himself hidden in the shadows. He watched as men moved in and out of the office, noting their patterns, their timings, the rhythm of their routines. On the 3rd night he saw him, the man with the black leather bag. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his cheek. He walked quickly, his eyes scanning the street with practiced caution. Sundar followed at a distance, careful not to draw attention. The man weaved through narrow lanes, past shuttered shops and silent homes until he reached a small building with no signboard. He entered, and the door locked behind him. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and the faint glow of a single bulb shone from inside. Sundar waited, crouched behind a stack of crates, his heart pounding. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the man emerged again, without the bag. The ledger is inside, Sundar thought. But before he could move, a voice whispered from behind him. "You shouldn't be here." Sundar spun around to find a thin young man in ragged clothes watching him. His eyes darted nervously toward the building. "They see everything. If they catch you, you are finished." Sundar studied him carefully. "You know what's inside that place, don't you?" The young man hesitated, then nodded. "The ledger. I used to work for them. I cleaned their offices. I saw the book once. It is filled with names, amounts, signatures. Powerful people, dangerous people. If it is ever exposed, the city will burn. Help me," Sundar said quietly. Fear flashed across the man's face. "No, I cannot. I left that life behind. They would kill me." Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. "Listen, my sister and her children are trapped because of them. But it's not just my family. It's hundreds, maybe thousands. If we do nothing, it continues. If we act, we can end it." The man's eyes filled with conflict. After a long silence, he whispered, "There is a key, hidden under the 3rd tile in the entrance. It unlocks the back door. But once you are inside, you are on your own." Sundar nodded, gratitude in his eyes. "That is enough." The man disappeared into the shadows, leaving Sundar alone once more. He returned to the apartment that night, exhausted but focused. His sister noticed the determination in his face and trembled. "Anna, what are you planning?" "I found it," he said quietly. "The place where they keep the ledger. I will go there." Her face drained of color. "No, you cannot. If they catch you, they won't just hurt you. They will destroy us all." Sundar's gaze softened. "Sometimes the greatest risk is the only path to freedom. I cannot let this cycle continue." As he spoke, a loud bang shook the apartment door. His sister screamed, pulling her children close. Sundar rushed forward, but before he could open it, a voice shouted from outside, "This is your last night here. Tomorrow, the children belong to us." Then came footsteps retreating down the stairs, fading into the night. His sister collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Sundar clenched his fists, fury and resolve burning inside him. They were escalating the threats, pushing fear to its limits. He knew now. There was no more time to wait. The next night, under the cover of darkness, Sundar returned to the building where the ledger was kept. The streets were quiet, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. He found the third tile by the entrance, lifted it carefully, and retrieved a small rusted key. Heart racing, he slipped to the back of the building and inserted the key into the lock. It clicked open with a faint metallic sound. He stepped inside. The room smelled of dust and secrets. Shelves lined the walls, and a single desk sat at the center with stacks of papers. Somewhere in here, the ledger waited. Sundar took a deep breath, scanning the shadows. Then, from the far corner, a voice spoke. "I was expecting you." Sundar froze. A figure stepped forward into the dim light, Karthik himself holding the black leather bag in his hand. The truth in daylight, the room was heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of Karthik's slow footsteps as he emerged from the shadows. The dim bulb above flickered, casting sharp lines across his face. He held the black leather bag in one hand like a trophy. His lips curled into a knowing smile. "You really thought you could sneak into my house of secrets?" Karthik's voice was low, dangerous. "Do you know how many eyes watch you in this city? Every step you took here was seen. I let you come this far because I wanted to see your courage burn into ash." Sundar stood still, his heart pounding, but his face remained calm. "You can watch every step, Karthik, but you cannot control where those steps lead. Your men follow me in the dark, but the truth will follow you in the light." Karthik's smirk hardened. "Truth? People don't care about truth. They care about fear, and I am fear. This ledger," he lifted the bag higher, shaking it slightly, "is not just numbers and names. It is power. Every politician, every officer, every businessman who owes me is written inside. If this book is ever exposed, they all fall. And do you think they will let that happen? No. They protect me because they protect themselves." He placed the bag on the desk slowly, leaning over it like a king over his crown. "So tell me, Sundar Pichai, what makes you think you can fight an empire?" Sundar took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Karthik. "Because empires built on fear are fragile. One crack and they collapse. You think people are too afraid to stand, but fear has limits. And when fear meets hope, hope wins." Karthik's laugh echoed through the room, cruel and sharp. "Hope does not feed hungry children. Hope does not pay debts. Hope does not keep families safe. Only money and power do." Sundar shook his head. "You're wrong. I've seen families survive storms with nothing but hope. I've seen people rise from nothing because they believed. Money is a tool, power is temporary, but hope is eternal, and that is what you can never kill." For the first time, Karthik's eyes flickered with something other than arrogance, annoyance, perhaps even unease. He snapped his fingers. Two men appeared from the shadows, stepping forward to seize Sundar. But Sundar raised his voice, steady and strong. "Before you touch me, know this. The people outside already know why I am here. If I don't walk out alive, they will come for you. Not with fists, but with truth. I have already spoken to them. They are ready to rise. One spark is all they need. And you, Karthik, are that spark?" His words hung in the air, thick and heavy. The guards hesitated, glancing at one another. Karthik noticed the flicker of doubt in their eyes and slammed his fist on the desk. Do not listen to him. He is just one man. But it was too late. The silence outside the building broke suddenly with the sound of murmurs, then shouts. Sundar had not lied. Workers, neighbors, shopkeepers, the silent victims of Karthik's rule, had gathered outside. Their voices rose like a tide, echoing through the narrow lanes. Release him, someone shouted. End the circle, another cried. The chants grew louder, shaking the very walls of the building. Sundar looked Karthik in the eye. Your empire ends tonight, not because of me but because of them. They are no longer afraid. Rage twisted Karthik's face. In a fit of fury, he lunged for the bag, yanking out the ledger. If this is what you want, then it dies with me. He shouted, raising it as though to tear the pages apart. But before he could, Sundar stepped forward, his voice booming louder than it had ever been. Karthik, tear that book and you tear yourself. Those names inside are not just numbers, they are witnesses to your crimes. If they fall, they will not save you. They will bury you to protect themselves. The truth of his words froze Karthik in place. His hand trembled, the ledger shaking between his fingers. And in that fragile moment, the rooftop door burst open. Police officers stormed in, their boots thudding against the concrete. Behind them, dozens of people from the crowd followed, their faces burning with years of anger. Karthik's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. How? Sundar's voice was calm now, almost gentle. Fear blinded you. While you threatened me, I was listening, gathering every story, every name. I shared them with those who could no longer be bought. Journalists, honest officers, people who still care. They are here now, and your book of secrets will speak louder than you ever could. The officers seized Karthik, wrenching the ledger from his grip. He fought, screamed, cursed, but it was useless. The people had already seen him fall. As they dragged him away, Sundar stood in the middle of the room, the crowd pressing in around him. Men and women who had once whispered their pain and fear now shouted openly, their voices trembling with long-awaited freedom. His sister pushed through the crowd, clutching her children. She reached Sundar and embraced him tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Anna, you did it. You saved us. Sundar shook his head softly. No, we saved each other. I was only the voice, but the courage came from all of you. The next morning, as the sun rose over Chennai, the story of Karthik's arrest spread like fire. Newspapers carried the headlines, news channels replayed the footage of the crowd breaking their silence, and whispers turned into proud conversations in tea shops and homes. The red circle was broken. Sundar sat quietly on the balcony of his sister's apartment, sipping tea as his nephew and niece laughed for the first time in months. Their laughter, innocent and unburdened, was the sweetest sound he had heard in years. His sister joined him, her face brighter, her shoulders lighter. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Sundar smiled gently. You don't need to. Family is not about thanks. It's about standing together, even when it feels impossible. She leaned against him, the weight of years of struggle, finally lifting. But the world will remember this as your victory. They will say Sundar Pichai came and saved us all. He shook his head, watching the children play. Let them say what they want. The truth is simpler. A sister asked her brother for help, and together they found the strength to fight back. The rest is just noise, and as the city outside pulsed with a new kind of energy, a mixture of relief, pride, and hope, Sundar realized something profound. Leadership was not only about boardrooms, profits, or global projects. Sometimes, leadership was about listening to a single voice in the darkness and choosing to act. That choice, he knew, was the one that truly defined him.